I'm Pete Kalu. I'm a writer of short stories, poetry, long fiction, theatre plays, radio plays, and requests to defer bailiffs attending my house. I write everything that I come to mind, really.
Thank you, Pete. Can we begin with you sharing why you contributed to this project?
Yes, I've been working in the area of the looking at colonial history of Britain for maybe 20, 30 years, and pretty much in a lonely way. Nobody was interested for many, many years. And but I've always had a love of history, and I always felt that the history I was presented at my school, Kings and Queens of England and what have you, wasn't really telling me enough about myself for me to be confident that it created a space for me to live here with a sense of safety and belonging. And so I think that's probably what the passion that carried me into this area of work. And so Corinne approached me, or else I read the advertising material saying, we want to do a set of stories that comment or reflect upon the colonial countryside. And I thought, wow, yeah, this is just my bag. I've been working in this area for so long. Now finally somebody else is not only interested, but saying, what are you doing? Can you contribute? So of course I corresponded. I was very happy to be selected to work on the project.
Brilliant, thank you. Was obviously a child-led project. What was your experience like working with the children, and do you wish you had access to a project like this when you were younger?
I would say that in this particular project, I didn't really work in schools much at all. In previous projects, I had done quite a lot of work. I remember going to Whitehaven, which is up at the border near Scotland, to work on slave trade histories. Whitehaven was a center of, I think, import of rum, among other things. And so they had their own slave trade connections. And it was a very difficult thing because it's not a subject that you can, some of its crudities and some of the distressing things that occurred during slavery, you have to approach with a degree of sensitivity to the audience and the young ones. You don't want them to be um, bursting into tears and wailing all the way home and saying what a horrible day I've had. So it's tricky. You have to put a lot of thought into it. My own approach was to create ghost stories, and I thought that the kids love ghost stories. If you ever want to be a storyteller and go in schools, tell them a ghost story, they'll love it. And then from the idea of the ghost, I started moving around to what haunts British history. What are the things that are there in a ghostly presence around British history? And I got into the slave trade through that. That worked for me. And in fact, I'm still doing that technique with a few other uh, projects that are live and ongoing now. I do use that ghostly approach. So yeah, it was good. And the children, the Whitehaven children, were primarily white actually. I always remember one of them wrote a letter. The school sent me letters that they wrote after I'd left, and one of them wrote, I really enjoyed your session. I learned so much. These are 9-year-olds, 7-year-olds. I really enjoyed it. You taught us so much, and I know I'll never see you again in my life. And I thought, well, it's true, but he's remembered me, and hopefully it will create more thoughtful citizens who have a wider awareness of what British history means.
Wow, that sounds like a really rewarding experience. What was your experience like writing for the Colonial Countryside Project?
It was maddening. It was difficult because on the one hand, I'd done a lot of research here, not specifically around Speak Hall, which is what I'd been asked to write about that building in Liverpool that was bought with the wealth made from slavery. primarily. It's just that I've been writing in Irish quite a while, and so of course it was something that I wanted to do. But getting into the details of it, you do come across some really harrowing, distressing aspects of that history, and also you do run into conflict sometimes with the researchers who are working for you alongside you, riding shotgun kind of, and sometimes with other people who are involved in the project. And I do know that I had quite a few debates with both National Trust figures and historians about what was permissible, how one was allowed to interpret the evidence, and uh, the degree of plausibility of various things. So it's quite a difficult act politically. There was some resistance to the stories that I wanted to develop. And then at the same time, you've got the emotional dimension, you've got the spiritual dimension that you're going into things that are just so bleak. I think they reached an idea with I think it's got the Thistlewood Diaries, which are probably the most evil, depressing diary ever written. And it's hard to dwell there for too long without scarring your heart, scarring your mind. And so in that sense, it can submerge you. The sheer bleakness can tug you under and leave you gasping for breath. And so you have to manage, you have to look after yourself. And that's probably why it took me 2 or 3 years to actually write the story, even though it's just a short story. It's probably 7,000 words. It took so long.
That's really interesting. You use the word maddening. What strategies did you adopt to deal with um the content that you were d dealing with, in terms of enslaved individuals' experiences, slavery practices, colonial administratives or figures and like the actions that they enacted or I guess just sort of the trauma of the enslaved experience.
I think you have to step away. I mean, that's why maybe I pace myself and I do things that are joyous, whether it's my own hopeless attempts at playing five-side football or just meet with friends, family, and wandering around parks and joining in carnivals. I mean, carnival is a mass therapy session at sometimes, and I used to have a carnival band, the Blue Devils, Moko Jumbis, as the poet Lems Cizé said, it's gold from the stone. The stones can fill your heart and kill you if you're not careful. You have to find the gold. You have to find the way of transmuting this into something that is going to, in some way, deepen, if not improve, your life or the collective life of ourselves as Black people. And maybe that's the thing that it gives us a greater understanding of who we are, why we are, and why others behave as they do. And so, although it's a very, very difficult journey to take, you do emerge from it if you survive with a better understanding of, for instance, why Liverpool is the way Liverpool is. There's huge, deep history of slavery in Liverpool and continues in the sort of post-colonial era in the various resistances and discrimination that's experienced by the Black population of Liverpool. Once you get a grip on this history, dire though it might be, it makes you. It actually is a healing thing in that you say, okay, I'm not mad. This stuff, this shit still happens, and here's its base. Here's where it's come from. So yeah, it's a double edged, isn't it? On the one hand, it's great healing. On the other hand, going there is like running through barbed wire at times.
Yeah, definitely. What do you think your piece contributes to wider conversations on colonial legacies? Legacies being um the word legacies, suggesting something positive.
I think that many of those who made great wealth from slavery did thorough work in trying to embellish their profile in a positive way. in the areas in which they invested and nationally. And so part of the conversation that I'm having through the story is with the historians and with the general population saying, okay, this Richard Watt that you know and this image that he has is not the complete story of Richard Watt. Let's grow our understanding of Richard Watt by bringing in a few other perspectives. And so that's the contribution I'm making, and I hope that it sits well with the contributions the other writers are making to, in essence, reinvent Britishness. That's a bigger project, you know. What is it to be British? What is British history that we can share and understand? Are we going to occlude it? Or are we going to bury it? Or are we going to say, yes, this too was part of the legacy of the past?
What does Britishness mean to you?
Well, I'll go back to John Major and his nuns on bicycles, warm beer, grey skies, lard. I think the Britishness is the very word has a kind of 1950s aura, and I rarely use it. I only use it at interviews like these, really. But if we are to reinvent the word or try to recalibrate what it means, then certainly in the here and now of where I live and the people I associate with, it's a much wider landscape full of far more variety, and uh, it's an imagination of a much more encompassing and inclusive future that allows my children and their children to live with ease in within the borders and beyond of Britain. That's the project.
That's really interesting. Back to your writing, could you talk a little bit about your writing style?
Yes, I write in many different forms. My writing style within short stories, I think that I don't really work in the realist mode, which is the sort of mode in which most people write. I tend to want to do offbeat things and to query the realist mode, to query the conventions of writing. And I think that's the short story form allows me to do that and is not so difficult for a reader to get through. You know, you get a 70,000 word book and you try and read Joyce's Ulysses, you know, you can, but, you know, it's maybe a year long or decade long project, you know, a short story is much more manageable. So, yeah, I've wanted to look at how can we reimagine the present? How can we reimagine the past? And what are the tools that might, the literary tools that might best allow us to do that, such that people can enjoy the story while being moved or entering into an original space, a space where they hadn't been before and which they may not have known existed. And so the project of reimagining Britishness and the project of accepting new spaces and new ways of understanding the world seem to require new techniques.
Thank you, Pete. Is it possible for you to share a bit from your piece?
Panel says, an unknown man by the British School. I'm not sure if that's meant to be Richard Watt. They seem very cautious. The historians are always cautious about these things. So this is the beginning of the story. I'll just read it. Richard Watt, West India merchant of Speke Hall. It was a gloomy winter evening in Speke, the sky heavy with stiffening cloud, the air damp. Wind moaned as it blew across the River Mersey and hit the crumbling casement windows of Speke Hall. There, inside the drawing room, West India merchant Richard Watt leaned forward in his chair, freshly ferried from Oak Hall with other sticks of furniture. He turned down the sputtering oil lamp that rested on the Japan coffee table and watched the play of shadows made by the lamp across the empty bookcases lining the walls. Then he turned to gaze for a while out of the windows at the oncoming storm, occasionally glancing too into the cold grate of the library's iron fireplace. He sighed. Richard Watt was in repose, and by instruction rather than choice. The instructing doctor, whose orders were strict, was even now fussing around him as he sat, the doctor's voluminous frock coat interrupting his view. "You are looking quite the Italian gentleman this evening, Mr. Watts." This was true. He had chosen for the visit, his first in purchasing the manor, a fitting outfit, a splendid purple coat of Italian filigree, a deep blue waistcoat trimmed in gold brocade, a crisp linen shirt with white ruffle at the throat and rushed sleeve collars, the same deep blue in breeches with buckle at knee, the finest Dutch white hose, and extra supple, gleaming black buckle shoes. Atop his head, he retained his favourite chestnut horsehair wig. "I have premonitions, Doctor. If I am to shuffle off my mortal coil, I intend to greet St. Peter in full style and with all my receipts." The doctor scoffed. "You'll see me off." He worked around the great man, maneuvering a joint here, patting a limb there, before bending to inspect his patient's swollen foot. "It is India cotton, that hose, the finest." "It is, indeed," the doctor concurred, "and so soft to the touch." That's the great man, Richard Watt, the intro to him. So that's the how he's presented often is the starting point, and of course the story then reworks that image and that presentation. Read it, you may enjoy it, and hopefully it's in some ways, brings some facts to light that you may not have encountered before. There is also an extract or a mini essay from the Liverpool Black History Research Group, which is also excellent and a really great supplement and complement to the story.
Thank you so much, Pete. Is there anything else you'd like to share?
Yeah, I'd just like to say I love People Tree. I'm one of their biggest fans. They've been going for 30, 35, maybe even 40 years, gathering together Caribbean voices, Caribbean literature, and putting it between the covers of books, and as well as anthologizing Caribbean writers and Black British writers. They've done a phenomenal job, and I'm deeply honored to be among such amazing company. I'm awed when I look at the list of contents, the names that there. I'm like I'm humbled. So I just hope my story holds up to the superb quality that's within the covers of Colonial Countryside. It's been great working on it. It's been a great pleasure.